Alan's house had many rooms, but only one door. A slice of morning sunlight crept through the drapes of his library window to interrupt his studies. Roused by the reminder of the passing hours, Alan clapped his book closed. His first thought, weighing heavily with self-admonishment, was that he had wasted far too much time in the luxury of reading. His second thought was that no sensible Reman would dare begin an expedition without first making a proper cup of tea. Alan yawned and rose from his easy chair, his knees groaning in protest. He wiped the blur from his eyes, plucked the spectacles from his nose and cleaned them on his sleeve. He shuffled to the door. The ring of keys at his side jingled with each footstep. Alan's door, the singular portal of his estate, was a slate of mahogany bearing a dozen knobs and twice as many locks. Alan selected the round brass orb at the center and turned it sharply to the left. He swung the door open and walked into his kitchen. He filled the kettle and placed it on the stove. The house had no electricity. There were no gas or steam lines tunneling within the walls. Yet, when Alan traced a fingertip in the air with a well-practiced gesture, a ring of blue flame puffed to life beneath the vessel. Alan left the water to boil and returned to the door, this time opening it with the red latch. Instead of returning to the study, Alan walked from his kitchen into the cramped and white-tiled bathroom. He relieved himself. As he washed his hands, he took a moment to splash a cupped hand of water on his face and smooth down the tangles of his gray beard. At the door, he turned the brass knob again to return to the kitchen. There he fussed throughout the drawers and cabinets until he'd assembled what he wanted. With a gentle clink of a cup and saucer and a careful pour, Alan set his tea to brew. He exited the kitchen to the study by way of the crooked glass doorknob. There he packed his books and maps into a black leather case which had once been a doctor's satchel. He glanced at the wall, looking over a row of clocks and muttering to himself. Some of Alan's clocks had 4 hands or more, while others had only 1. A few of the faces counted more than 12 hours. A couple had none at all. Alan returned to his door, this time rifling through the ring of keys clipped to his belt. He selected a steel key with a head in the shape of a fleur-de-lis and opened one of the locks. He then turned the metal knob, looking like the spigot to a faucet, and opened the door to his armory. Alan donned his favorite gauntlets, lined with comfortable folds of velvet, nestled within shining plates of steel. He clipped on his chest plate, noting with a grumble how snug it had become around his midsection. After careful consideration, he chose the machete. He balanced it carefully in his hand, feeling for the trigger at the crook of his finger. Alan had carved a gap into the handle of the weapon in order to embed a plastic kitchen lighter within the wood. He held out the machete at arm's length. He kept the blade well away from his beard, as he was the sort of Reman who didn't care to learn a painful lesson twice. Then he clicked the trigger. Along the blade, steel burst into brilliant white flame. Alan shielded his eyes from the fire, now as hot and blazing as a welding torch. He released the trigger, and the white flare hissed away into a quick death. Alan blinked away the splotches of purple that swam across his vision. Then he smiled. He slid the weapon into its leather sheath and buckled it across his back. His tea was ready. Alan returned to the kitchen and placed his gauntlets on the counter. He took his tea with careful, relishing sips and watched the scenery out the window. The morning sun that had disturbed him in the library had been birthed from a warm and summery day. Here, though, just outside his kitchen, was a late afternoon beneath a gray sky. In the distance, the bare tree branches waved in the wind. A light powder of snow was lying on the ground. Alan clattered his dishes into the sink, then wriggled his fingers back into his gauntlets. He traveled back and forth through the door, moving throughout the other rooms of his house, the bedroom, the greenhouse, then the workshop, then 2 more of his 4 libraries. His steps were all the louder now, between his keys and pieces of armor. He gathered the rest of his supplies and locked up the house, each room secured behind the single door. He snapped his fingers as a passing thought struck him. Alan scribbled a quick note for his apprentice and left it on the tabletop in the aviary to make sure his extended absence would not alarm the boy. His final preparations made, Alan stood before the exit and heaved a long sigh to steel his resolve. From the ring on his belt, he produced a large black key with a spiral-shaped head. He opened 4 locks in succession, then lurched the bar of rusted iron. He pushed the door out into swaths of thick shadows. He could feel the heat of his home hemorrhaging out into the freezing expanse. Alan knew that slaying a dragon was no small task. It would be a long, cold, and dangerous expedition. It would test the limits of his power. What Alan did not know, as he left his house of many rooms for the final time, was that the dragon was waiting for him.